There are currently 3 states in the US with plans to limit what you can print with your 3D printer. And the EU is considering tagging along. But why do governments want to put surveillance software inside your printer, make it illegal to remove that software, and make the storage or sharing of some files illegal? Phil here in the layer by layer. I'm going to start out right at the top and say that I think it should be illegal to share or have certain kinds of files. Maybe not the kinds of files that are in question with this legislation, and for the sake of the algorithm, I'm not going to go into details, but I think anybody can think of a few files where sharing or possession should reasonably be prohibited. With that said, on to the rest of the video. I want to discuss the legislation in question, but first I think it's important to get a little history about at-home 3D printing. The 3D printing technology most of us use, fused deposition modeling, or FDM for short, the kind where a hot nozzle squirts, the kind where a hot end squeezes, the kind where plastic is melted and extruded out layer by layer, oh look, the name of the channel, was actually invented in the late 1980s. It was patented, and it was controlled, and for years it was expensive industrial equipment that regular people had absolutely no access to. Then, in 2005, a British engineer named Adrian Bowyer at the University of Bath had a wild idea. What if I could make a printer that can print the preponderance of parts needed for making a printer? Basically, can I make a primarily printable printer? And what if it was open source? He called it RepRap, short for Replicating Rapid Prototyper. The goal was that anyone could build one, improve it, share their improvements, and the thing would just keep getting better and spreading. And even with companies like Bamboo Lab, which, full disclosure, is the brand of printer I have, trying to lock things down more, the community outcry has hindered that, because the concept of open source sharing is foundational to the 3D printing hobby. I believe that someone should be able to build their own printer and tinker as much as they want, while I also want products that don't require as much tinkering to exist. Let the users choose what they want. But the proposed legislation is looking to stop that, or at least severely hinder it. To understand these new laws, you have to understand what they're trying to address. Ghost guns, also called proton packs. These, wait. Oh, they're what? Oh. I'm being told a ghost gun is a homemade unserialized firearm and is not, in fact, for hunting ghosts. Which is fine, because I ain't afraid of no ghost. Ghost guns existed long before 3D printing was a thing, but then in 2013, a guy named Cody Wilson released the Liberator, a functional pistol that could be downloaded as a file and printed on a consumer 3D printer. The government ordered the files taken down, but by then, Pandora's box was open and the files had spread, and the concept of 3D printed guns expanded from there. There wasn't as much concern about this until the murder of the CEO of United Healthcare with a gun containing 3D printing components, which has spurred on this new legislation. Now, to be fair, this isn't a situation where no laws exist. In 2022, the ATF updated its rules to close some of the loopholes around unfinished firearm components. And the 3 states with new laws we'll be discussing already have their own laws around ghost guns. So laws exist that make possession of these guns illegal. But they can only really be enforced after the use of a weapon has occurred, or if they're found during another investigation. How do you enforce a law when the means of breaking that law are sitting on desktops, in garages, or at makerspaces everywhere, even in some public libraries? And their answer is apparently, put spy software in the printer. We'll talk about the details right after this, but if you're liking the video so far, hit the thumbs up button. I spent a fair bit of time researching and even read the applicable portions of the bills in question. Though this is just a prop stack of paper. I didn't print the bills out. I'm not a lunatic. I've also said guns so many times I could use the likes to balance things out with the algorithmic overseer. There are 3 states with current laws in motion as of this video, and the proposals are a bit different. We'll start with Washington State because they're the furthest along. House Bill 2320 was signed into law on March 11th of 2026 and takes effect July 1st. At its core, it updates Washington's existing ghost gun law to make it explicitly illegal to fabricate a firearm or firearm parts using a 3D printer or CNC machine without the proper permits. Look, I'm not going to pretend that's completely outrageous. It's largely extending existing law to cover new technology explicitly. Though I'm sure there are plenty of people who will disagree with the ghost gun laws. You can leave comments below. More boosts for the all-seeing algo. House Bill 2320 also prohibits marketing a machine or code as primarily used for the creation of firearms. So Bamboo Lab can't release the H2G, where the G stands for gun, and market it as the ultimate gun printer. While Bill 2320 is mostly reasonable, there's House Bill 2321, the follow-up bill that's currently stalled. Early drafts of 2321 called for pre-installed scanning software on every 3D printer sold in the state. Programs that would watch what you're printing and block anything that's a gun or gun part, and software that would also flag suspicious files. This is a common theme throughout all three laws I'm discussing, and I'll go over why this is a bad idea after giving you the details of the other states' bills. On to New York. This is a bit of a weird one in that the law is included in Part C of the state budget bill. I think it's kind of odd for new criminal law to be included in a budget, but it's apparently normal, at least in New York. What is alarming about this being included in the budget, however, is that the budget is running late. They're in a hurry, and that means this may not get the attention it deserves. So what's actually in Part C? Section 2.11 says any person who sells, offers to sell, transfers, distributes, or otherwise disposes of a digital firearm manufacturing code to any person who does not hold both A, a gunsmith license as provided in Section 400 of this chapter, and B, a valid Type 7 federal firearms license, is guilty of a Class E felony. Section 2.12 goes on to make it a felony for anyone to possess such code with the intent to use it or distribute it to someone that isn't a licensed gunsmith. It isn't clear to me how they would show intent, but there may be a lawyer-speak definition I'm not aware of. These may seem reasonable, but the net this law casts is very broad. An unwitting person could have code that runs afoul of the law. Journalists writing about ghost guns could be caught up in the net. Even security researchers testing the software in question could be caught in the crosshairs. And then, factoring in Section 2.11, whoever gave the files to any of the above would also be guilty, and in both cases they would be guilty of a felony, which is a big deal. But wait, there's more! Subpart B would require every 3D printer and CNC machine sold in New York to have built-in algorithms scanning your design files and blocking prints identified as firearm parts. The state would maintain a database of banned files. That part is pretty similar to the Washington state law, and I'll get to why that's bad later, like I said. Though at least the New York law had the foresight to include this little bit here that says that if it's determined to be impossible, then no regulations will be enforced. But the real gem is a little lower. No such sale or delivery shall be permitted unless the transferee meets in person with the transferor to accomplish such sale or delivery. So in other words, 3D printers and CNC machines can't be shipped. So if you don't live near a store, I guess tough luck? This is even more ridiculous in the case of CNC machines, which can cost tens of thousands of dollars and require a semi-truck to transport. Of course, I have a semi-truck readily available, as do most people I know, so that really shouldn't be an issue, actually. And then there's California, a state that saw poorly drafted laws in Washington and New York that would be difficult to surpass and said, "Hold my beer." The Electronic Frontier Foundation has called the California bill, quote, "the most troubling." We did it! Like the other laws, the California law requires print blocking surveillance, along with adding a dash of bureaucracy and a misdemeanor charge if you want to run your own firmware. That's right. If you're running Clipper or Flash your machine with new firmware that doesn't comply with the law, you have committed a misdemeanor. It also basically prevents you from building your own 3D printer if that's what you choose to do, which was the whole thing that made 3D printing at home accessible in the first place. With all that said, I'll now go over why all of this doesn't work with 3D printing today, how manufacturers might make it work, and why the options are all bad. The whole premise is that software or firmware can look at a 3D file and say, "This is a gun part." Blocked. And that sounds reasonable until you actually think about how any of this works. A 3D printer doesn't know what it's printing. It sees G-code. Move here, extrude this much, move there. It's just coordinates and movement instructions. The printer has no concept of what it's building aside from sometimes a low-res image. It's like looking at a recipe, but with the title, the ingredients list, and the life story of the author removed. There are hints to what you might be making, but it isn't clear. The geometry of a firearm component isn't some unique, identifiable thing. It's just shapes. And a lot of those shapes look identical to completely innocent objects. Even if you build a block list of known gun files like these laws propose, someone can change a few dimensions, split the model into multiple pieces, rename it, rotate it, or just design a slightly different version that achieves the same result. Unlike paper currency, which has very specific security features that detection software is actually decent at recognizing, and a design that is centrally controlled, firearms come in a large variety of shapes and configurations. This would mean the printer would have to use AI to make a best guess from G-code playing, "Is it a gun?" That scenario presumes a 3D printer would actually qualify as a contestant, and today's machines wouldn't. A machine would have to be able to run the AI model to enable detection, and the computing power in an existing 3D printer is not that high. They also usually have significantly less than a gigabyte of RAM, which is a very important component for AI. So now, 3D printers would have to get more expensive, especially with RAM prices these days.
Hubble into the deepest grandeur of our universe.
Manufacturers won't want to do that, so now the slicer, or something in the cloud, has to decide if it can be printed or not. If a vendor decides to rely on a slicer, which at least could see the model it's slicing, then you can say goodbye to Orca Slicer or the ability to use any other slicer you choose. The printer would have to only accept sliced files from the blessed slicer, or the controls would be too easily circumvented. Let's say that instead a manufacturer decides to implement these controls on a server. You can generate the G-code however you want, but you have to send it via the blessed server. The same issue of evaluating a print on the printer exists, namely having only the G-code to evaluate, and on top of that, now you can't print anything locally and all of your files are going to the cloud. I don't personally care about that for my prints, since a Minecraft creeper or sick Pac-Man aren't trade secrets. But that is a real concern for people who actually are printing trade secrets, or for people who just don't want to upload their stuff to a server when they could just as easily and more securely print it locally. And here's the thing, none of this will actually stop anybody from 3D printing a gun if they really want to. You can still build your own printer and run open source firmware. It would be illegal in California, but they aren't going house to house to look. What it will do is stop people from printing things that aren't guns, decrease privacy, and create a taller wall around the gardens of all of the manufacturers. These laws benefit big manufacturers more. They're better able to lock people into their printer environments already, and then the bureaucratic overhead becomes difficult to follow for companies just starting out. There are things that you can do to stop it. Editing Phil here, back in the layer by layer layer with an urgent update. It turns out New York was in such a hurry that they've actually managed to pass the bill through both the House and the Senate, and it is going to the governor. So if you want to see a change, you need to contact your governor right now. Okay, back to the video. For those in Washington, New York, or California, contact your representative and let them know your thoughts. If you live in a different state or even a whole different country, keep an eye on what your governments are trying to do. I know that the EU is already exploring new laws to pass with respect to 3D printing guns. You can also share this video with your friends, give it a like, and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.